is yet to come.
Hello and welcome everyone from Cape Town in South Africa. I'm your host, Brenda Adelman, and welcome to the CuppaChino Club social TV channel, and a warm welcome to you, Viola. How are you?
Good. Fine, thank you. Just had a good day today. It's been interesting to see how, industries are going live, Brigitte. So they're sort of getting online, and there seems to be a lot more activity just in terms of a lot of, little small shops opening up and a lot more cars on the road and so on. So it's been good. How was your weekend? Did you have a good weekend?
It's been a busy weekend, but not such a pleasant one. Had another memorial service to attend on the weekend, so a bit of sadness. But I must say there's been so many of those in the last couple of weeks that it's hard not to feel affected by it. But another one of the unintended consequences of COVID-19, that it's so much harder to give and receive comfort.
Yeah. And you know what, Brigitte, that kind of situation can never become normal. It can never become our new normal, that you aren't able to comfort somebody who's experiencing loss. That's one of the sort of things we still have to bring with us, is the ability to still hug and just to care for somebody and to be there for them. So that's one of the things I honestly think everybody's really looking forward to once, we get back down to level 1, and, the whole lockdown situation is part of our interesting past. Because I think, just the idea of losing someone and not being able to comfort people, it's just so difficult.
Oh, absolutely. So let's just say a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Always great to know that. We're in Cape Town in South Africa here, but it's lovely to connect with people worldwide. Just picking up on something you said now, the inability for us to sort of connect with people on a human level, wanting to hug and show affection. One of the things that I think, has not been touched or covered by our government in particular, I'm not sure how other governments have dealt with it in other countries, but one thing that has not been dealt with here is how that has affected and is affecting our children. Children by their very nature, they want to hug, they want to huddle, they want to exchange sandwiches with each other, they want to exchange their devices with one another. It's something we've taught them to do. We've taught our children to share and to care. And now we're telling them, don't touch, don't communicate, don't hug, don't share. It's a very different thing. They were yanked out of school. Now they're pushed back into school without counseling, without all necessary checks and balances. And so it'd be great for us to be able to, at some point, maybe get a psychologist on the show and chat about that, and see what they're doing at school level, because certainly I haven't seen any initiative on government level.
Yeah, no, agreed. There's going to be such a lot of effects, and I don't think we'll probably see the effects of it right now. We will probably see the effects of this new phase and new walk of life in a few years, when the kids have now gone back to school and everybody thinks it's gone and forgotten. It's still going to be something, I think, that will stay with our kids for a little while, because children sort of take a little longer, in my assessment, to internalize things and work through things, but again, if you just think of it from a child's perspective, exactly what you're saying, yanked out of school, suddenly school's closed, a long period where there was like no interaction with your friends, all the uncertainty of, do I go back to school? Am I going back to school? Am I not going back to school? So there was no smooth transition back to school. Many of our kids went back to school and then were told not to go back to school the next day. They are in school in the most odd circumstances, far from their friends, just in terms of physical distance, social distancing. So the friends are quite far, wearing a mask all day, everybody like sort of just very militant and policing them in terms of their social distancing, in terms of their masks, etc., and all for their own good. Absolutely agree with that. But the psychological effects on our kids, I honestly think it's going to take a while for us to understand that. Today, we had an incident around the corner in our neighborhood of the police having to be called in because the kids started protesting on their own in the school, because they had just started a rumor that there was a COVID case at the school. There was no COVID case at the school, but they became so destructive that the police had to be called in. And I mean, massive amounts of resources called into the school to just stop any kind of deviant behavior in terms of, breaking school property, etc., etc. So I think our children are struggling with it. I really honestly believe exactly what you said. I think they're struggling with it, and I think the full impact of this is only going to be seen much later.
And of course, along with that is also the anxiety. Children pick up on the emotional and social cues from their parents. So, that anxiety, am I going to be exposing myself to COVID while I'm at school? And
Yeah.
the impact of that. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. But talking about unpacking, we've got an exciting week ahead of us.
Yes, we do. I am so excited about our guest tomorrow. Many South Africans will remember Johnny Issel. We are going to talk to his daughter tomorrow. And with it being Youth Day, 16th of June, it's Youth Day. It's a holiday, national holiday for South Africans. Just the opportunity to speak to somebody who went through, I think, such an interesting childhood. I don't know if there are a lot of people who could have who can identify with her, just having to go through such an interesting childhood, being locked up in prison at 10 years old, for, just standing up for what she knew was right and what her father had taught her she needed to stand up for. And having to write a book now where she's just been very open and transparent about what those experiences were without being politically correct all the time. What an interesting lady to speak to. So tomorrow's Youth Day, it's great for us to speak to a young person, a lady who's gone through a very interesting and challenging childhood, and how she has transitioned into being the woman she is now. So very exciting tomorrow.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack about her story. And it's an insider's view into what it was like to be a child at that time, having
Yes,
to live through the apartheid years. There's a lot there that our young people, the younger generation, has no idea about. A
correct.
lot of them may throw around the word apartheid with no context, with no real context or real understanding of what the issues were at that time. It's just beyond them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the sacrifices that were required from the families of these political leaders. I think that's the one thing that stuck with me was the sacrifices that came. You didn't sign up for it, but there were certain sacrifices that were, just thrust upon you. You had to deal with it as a child. She had to deal with it. Her siblings had to deal with it. And it's just very interesting to see how her father eventually decided to cope with it. So nice opportunity for us to speak to our kids. It's interesting for kids to just appreciate their education, appreciate where we are now. A lot of our kids don't understand the sacrifices that were made. And so for me, it's essential that they have the opportunity to just have a glimpse into the sacrifices of just one family. And there's so many more. Just one family who made these sacrifices. So when I hear young people who are eligible to go and vote, when I speak to them and I hear that they haven't voted, it's something that really frustrates me, because it's not about who you vote for. It's the fact that lots of people fought for you to have the opportunity to participate in this process. And so, yeah, it's I'm just really excited to speak to Leda. Very amazing, down to earth lady. Just really someone that you can warm up to, excited to chat to her.
Well, just listening to what you were saying, I was thinking about the interview we had with Cameron Dugmore on Friday, where he gave us a bit of insight into his personal life and how his life as a politician impacts his family. And that's something that we don't often consider.
Yeah,
and even in business, behind every successful businessman or businesswoman, there's a family that's impacted by their actions. And I think, just in anything that we do or say, Viola, sometimes we forget that it's bigger than us. Whatever we do
absolutely.
or we say, it's not, a lot of people are often insistent on their rights. It's my right to do this or that. Yes, it may be your right to do whatever you please, but it does have an impact on your family. It has an impact on your community. It has
Absolutely.
a knock-on effect on everyone that forms part of your social circle. So it's always bigger than just you.
Yes, yes. There's a training course I used to do, and one of the things we would always talk about was the song "I Did It My Way," and we would always talk about how factually incorrect that is, because it's just like, so many people who are directly affected by the decisions that you take, that it cannot be, this whole thing, you sort of, it's my life. It's not. It's just
Mhm.
affects so many people. And so when you sit down and you consider a lot of these politicians, a lot of the business leaders, a lot of our executives and influential people, we must recognize, in order for them to be there and to be effective and efficient, they have to give time as a resource. It's one of the biggest resources that they contribute to getting to where they are. And because they've contributed that resource to a cause, their families have missed out on them. And so
So
it's
to
always something for us to consider.
Absolutely. So Layla is on tomorrow, and then on Wednesday, we've got Brenda Adelman on the show. Also, a very, very dynamic woman with a very, very interesting story. Her situation is that her father shot and killed her mother, and then 3 months later married her aunt, the sister of her mom. So that's a very interesting story, and how she needed to find ways of dealing with that level of trauma, and how she's using that knowledge, that ability to pivot, how she's using that to help people right now who are in situations where they need to pivot and are struggling with it.
Yeah,
So looking forward to having her on the show on Wednesday. Um,
absolutely. And
and then,
you
yep,
know what's interesting, Brigitte, is that, I always say this, so you get uh, slightly preoccupied with your concerns and your problems and your life. I keep thinking about the fact that if every single person had to put their problems down as a pile in front of them,
which
you would
one would you
very
choose?
you would very quickly pick up your own pile, because it's probably a lot smaller than everybody else around you. So it's interesting to listen to people's stories, but it's also interesting for me. It's the main thing is the resilience. It's what have they learned? How has it affected them as a people, as people? Because you can become better or better, and with many of these people, most of them have the emotional intelligence to make them better people, and that's where we learn. That's where the learning really comes from. It's like, you go through a difficult time, but you come out of the on the other side a better person.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are watching right now, we did a show just a few days ago on the importance of emotional intelligence and your ability to cope with the unintended consequences of COVID-19. So if you missed
Yeah.
that show, please do go back and watch that episode on emotional intelligence, and how that affects your coping ability.
Hmm.
And
And
then on
then
Thursday,
Thursday.
a little touch on the education sector, and how the education sector needs an overhaul. I really I'm looking forward to having Jim Baker on the show. His take on the education sector is, and again, I think that same thinking um, applies not just to the education sector per se, but it could apply to the business community as well. He's saying, because we talk a lot about pivoting, thinking outside of the box, doing things differently, and his philosophy is that we don't want to think out of the box, because if we're thinking outside of the box, we're still thinking about or within the confines of the box. And so he's saying kick the box.
Mm,
He's saying, build from scratch, do things differently. He talks about how the education sector has failed our children. It has been failing for years and years and years and years. And he's saying, why can we not realize that COVID-19 gives us the opportunity to do things over, to do things
Mm,
differently? So it's going to be
mm.
very interesting to speak to Jim on Thursday. And then
Thursday.
what's up on Friday, Viola?
Friday, we have the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Jeffrey Jacobs, speaking to us about the business sector and how the business sector in the Western Cape has been affected by COVID, a just general sort of overview, and then also how the business chamber has actually been intervening and been working on the behalf of businesses. So it's going to be interesting to speak to him. It's going to be interesting to also just hear from him in terms of what their involvement has been as a business organization, what the involvement of business organizations has been in terms of creating an economic rescue plan, and how involved they've been with government on that. So, our president keeps talking about consultation. He's consulting people. So it would be interesting to just see how involved or uninvolved the business sector has been in that economic rescue plan. So on Friday, it's going to be a great show, great opportunity to just get a view from business in terms of how business is doing, where business is falling apart, how they are coping, what has been put in place, how people have picked up on the support that has come in place, and just hear some of the conversations that are happening in that space. So I'm quite keen to speak to him, and that's on Friday. It's going to be, we've got a full week.
I know, really looking forward to the conversations that are going to follow this week. And of course, one of the things we're looking forward to next week is taking a closer look at the NGO or NPO sector,
Yes.
and to see how they are pivoting as well. So if you're watching the show and there's a particular guest or industry or something that you'd like us to focus on in the show, do let us know in the comments. Or if you're a business and you've pivoted, let us know what you've done. And if you'd like us to feature your industry or your business on the show, do reach out to us as well.
Yeah. Lots
And
going on.
I think that's a wrap because we've got so much excitement for the rest of the week.
Yes.
So tomorrow is Layla.
Tomorrow's Layla, and we go live at 3 o'clock local time. We go live at 3 o'clock tomorrow. So that's quite exciting. I'm really looking forward to chatting to her.
Oh, absolutely. So that is 3 p.m. South African time, which will be 8 a.m. on Central Time. It'll be 9 a.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. UK time if you're joining us from internationally. So thanks for joining us, everyone. And we invite you to join us for the rest of the week because we've got a full lineup and a very exciting lineup that is. And be safe, take care, have a great evening or afternoon further.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.